Acquisition and loss of territory. State territory means the sphere within which a state enjoys sovereignty. The modes of acquisition of territory are occupation, prescription, accretion, cession, annexation, lease, pledge, plebiscite, and acquisition of sovereignty by newly emerged state. So what is occupation? It means that a state intentionally acquires sovereignty over a territory which is not under authority of another state. The three conditions for occupation are establishing sovereignty over a territory. That territory was not previously under another state. That territory is newly discovered or abandoned by another state. The elements of occupation are the will to exercise sovereignty and an exhibition of actual authority. The case law we will refer to as the Island of Palmas Arbitration, 1929. It was a territorial dispute over the Island of Palmas between the Netherlands and the United States, which was heard by the Permanent Court of Arbitration. The USA claimed to have acquired it under a treaty of 1898 with Spain, whereas the Netherlands claimed to acquire it in 1700. It was held that although the said island was discovered by Spaniards, they never occupied it or established contracts with inhabitants. Hence, they had no right to transfer it. Island of Palmas was declared to be a part of the Netherlands East Indies and is now part of Indonesia. Next is prescription. It means if a state exercises control and establishes occupation and de facto sovereignty over a particular territory for a long time, then it becomes a part of the state. According to D.H.N. Johnson, the conditions for prescription are that the territory has not accepted the sovereignty of another state over the said territory. Its possession should be peaceful and uninterrupted, be public, for a definite period, and observed as a matter of right. The case laws for prescription are Frontier Lands Case, Belgium vs. Netherlands. Temple of Preah-Vihear, Cambodia vs. Thailand. The third mode of acquisition is accretion. Title by accretion occurs when a new territory has been added mainly through natural causes like floods or earthquakes. No formal act or assertion is necessary. Acquisition of territory also occurs through cession. Cession of natural territory means the transfer of sovereignty over the said territory by the owner state in the favor of another state. It is of two types. It may be done voluntarily and expressly. It may be necessary by implication or under compulsion as a result of war. Another way of territorial acquisition used to be by annexation, which is obsolete now. After war, the conquering state established its sovereignty over the conquered state. The UN Charter Article 2(4) says that members of the UN shall respect territorial integrity and political independence of each other, shall not use force against each other. For example, annexation of Kuwait by Iraq and declaring it as Iraq's 19th province was declared null and void by UNSC. Subsequently, Kuwait was freed. Next is lease, which means that a state gives some of its territory under lease to another state for a certain period of time. However, complete right of sovereignty cannot be leased. For example, Malta leased one of its islands to Britain. Acquisition through pledge means that sometimes a state pledges a part of its territory to another state for money. For example, the Republic of Guinea had pledged the island of Corsica to France. Plebiscite is another way of territorial acquisition and it is a direct vote by electorates on an issue of national importance like self-determination. For example, West Irian was claimed by both the Netherlands and Indonesia. A plebiscite was held under the auspices of the UN. Hence, the inhabitants of West Irian decided to merge with Indonesia. Lastly, we discuss acquisition of sovereignty by newly emerged state. This is particularly true of those states who were previously colonies of some states and later on were liberated. For example, Pakistan's independence in 1947. Now let's discuss the modes of loss of territory. There, secession. Operation of nature. Subjugation, prescription, dereliction or abandonment. Revolt and lastly, granting of independence to a colony by an imperial state. Secession is a process in which one state loses a part of its territory which is not acquired by another state. After severance, the lost part will gain a new and international personality. In the case of peaceful secession, Latvia, Lithuania and Estonia become independent from the USSR. Whereas in secession by revolt, Bangladesh was separated from Pakistan in 1971. Loss of territory is also done by the operation of nature. Sometimes a state may lose its territory through the operation of nature like an act of God. For example, by earthquake, a coast of sea or an island may altogether disappear. And the change in the course of rivers may also result in loss of territory. Next is subjugation. When a state acquires a territory through annexation, the other loses it through subjugation. The use of force is involved in this process. Yes, prescription is also a mode of loss of territory. When a state occupies a particular territory for a long period, then it is entitled to acquire it through prescription. On the contrary, the state which had occupation over it earlier may lose it. By dereliction or abandonment, we mean that a state relinquishes a territory and releases the right of sovereignty over it. The essentials to dereliction are the abandonment of territory and the intention of giving up sovereignty over it. For example, islands of Santa Lucia, Delagoa Bay. Revolt results in loss of territory sometimes. It happens when a new state takes birth in consequence of revolution. For example, in 1776, through the War of Independence of America, Great Britain lost the territory of America. Next is granting of independence to a colony by an imperial state. It is generally done to a colony by an imperialist state. A state loses territory without acquisition by another state. The new state requires a separate international personality after severance. For example, the subcontinent was a colony of Great Britain. The new states that emerged after its severance were Dominion of India and Dominion of Pakistan in 1947.